I'm joined by some super amazing individuals. You'll see them on the screen here. Meg Lindsay from Providence, Jeff Grand from Credential Engine, Laura Ward with the Merit team, and me as well. So it's so great to have so many of you here, that some that we know, some new faces. So excited to have you all here. So before we begin, I'm going to share a little bit of housekeeping with y'all so you know how to interact with us, because today is truly meant to be a dialogue, right? And we really mean that. So we want to pass the megaphone from these amazing individuals to y'all as well to share. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next slide here. So where can you chat with us? Just at the bottom of your screen, you'll see next to the participant button, there's the chat button. So you can go in there and drop questions and share out with us. I'd actually like to invite you now. We'd love to hear, where are you zooming in from and what org are you with? So if you want to drop that in the chat, we would love to know. Also, if some of you would like to turn on closed captioning, we can help you do that as well. So if you just look below our faces on Zoom, you can tap the live transcript button to select and show subtitles, because again, we want to make sure our conversation is accessible to everyone. Awesome. So I'll pause for a moment here. In the Q&A, sorry. So also below our faces is the Q&A. So that's where you can go ahead and drop in your questions. We will be saving a good portion of our time today together so that you can ask questions, because that's all part of this dialogue. Awesome. So if you're just joining us, an invitation to share in the chat box and let us know where you're zooming in from and what org you're with, because we'd love to see that you're here. All right. And I'm just pausing to let people catch up here, because I think some of you just came on in. All right, so let's also move forward. We have a poll as well. So we want to hear from all of you. We know this is a huge topic. We know we're only going to talk about a portion of this very big conversation that's happening nationally and in communities everywhere. So we really thought it was important that we could hear from you and you could share out with this whole community that's joining us today, and let us know, where are you at with your skills-based approach? Again, no wrong answers. We just want to know so we can be in community together. So maybe you're just beginning, meaning this is kind of a new approach to me. Maybe you're in the beginning of a planning phase, but don't have something set yet. Maybe you're actually piloting something and you're trying it out. Maybe you're kind of in the intermediate phase where you have some experience. Maybe you're an expert and are really advanced in this space, have tried multiple things. So I'm going to pause here and just invite y'all to take the poll, and we'll see who we've got in the room. Awesome. All right, let's see. Okay, almost 50% are just beginning. Welcome to all of you. I feel like in some way we all, using a beginner's mind, right, are beginning on this. 25% are already planning something, 19% are piloting, 13% are intermediate. Is anyone being shy here? No one said they're an expert, but I actually think that makes sense, because this is a new landscape for all of us. This is a pivot, a harder pivot in some ways for some of us than others. So I really appreciate your honesty in sharing this poll. So we hope that today we will support each and every one of you with this conversation. All right. So as we begin, okay. And if anyone's having trouble with the chat, just hang tight for a moment. We'll make sure that you can access the chat. So apologies if anyone had any issue with that. So the place that we thought was really important to start is, first and foremost, whenever we want to create change, It is so important that we have a common language. If we don't have a common language, we can't partner, we can't collaborate, we can't problem solve or connect dots together. So we thought it was really important to pick 3 key terms that we see popping up in the skills-based conversation now and begin to create some common nomenclature, common terminology. So first and foremost, we thought we would level set and define credential. Credential is a noun, a qualification, achievement, personal quality, or aspect of a person's background, which is typically used to indicate that they're a good fit or qualified for something. So that's a credential. Next up on our list is to define what an LER, or learning and employment record, means. So a verified digital record of an individual's work and education experience that is in one centralized location. And this can help describe someone's abilities when pursuing education and or employment opportunities. So that is an LER, or a learning employment record, if you've been hearing that thrown around a bit. And last but not least, we decided it was also important to define what a digital wallet is. So this is a secure but easily shareable storage of an individual's learning and employment record, as well as additional information can be in there. So I know sometimes these two can get confused, but the digital wallet is a larger umbrella. So additional information like medical records, licenses, and other important identifying information can be in a digital wallet. If these are interesting to you and you're hoping to grab these definitions, use them, start a conversation with them, look for an email after this event and dialogue, and you can use these as well. So we'll be sharing them as a resource. So as we level set and hopefully are inviting all of you to this conversation, I want to open up the floor, share the megaphone, if you will, with 3 amazing individuals and begin this conversation. Also, please let us know if you're still unable to participate via the chat. We'll be monitoring that because we want to make sure this is accessible to all of you. Amazing. So welcome again, Laura, Meg, and Jeff. I'm so glad to have you all here to kick off this first conversation that we're having around the skills-based strategies in workforce. So to kick things off today, you each sit in very unique spaces in this ecosystem and landscape in terms of workforce and education, thinking about talent pipelines, et cetera. So I want to ask each of you if you would be willing to just kick us off and share from where you each are sitting, what's really standing out to you in terms of navigating a skills-based workforce? And please feel free, whoever wants to jump in first. I want this to be casual.
Thanks, Dana. I'm happy to get us started. There is a tremendous amount of activity going on across the country around skills-based hiring practices, LERs, what have you. And the context that we've seen at Credential Engine is that that's all occurring within a fairly large and distributed ecosystem of credential offerings. We did a research report for several years now, just identifying how many credentials are being offered in America. And we've now documented over 1 million credential offerings. The challenge that the states, federal government, lots of different communities face, though, is that the details of what those offerings are, what they consist of, what it takes to earn them, how they relate to career pathways and jobs, all of that kind of metadata and information about the credential offerings is just really not known in a consistent way. And so I've found a lot of folks just working towards a basic understanding of their credentialing ecosystem, which is a good, healthy work for lots of different use cases.
Yeah. So all those who know the beginner, Jeff, I think you just made a lot of people feel a lot better that there's a lot. There's a lot out there to take in and wrap our arms around. So I appreciate you kicking us off and sharing that. Meg and Laura, what are y'all thinking?
Yeah, I can go next. So I work in healthcare, right? And healthcare has some of the most entry-level positions and some of the highest education, in a profession. And so when we think about credentials and certifications, we do a really good job of qualifying that in some of our higher areas of employment. So having this skills-based learning enables us to bring that down to a little more entry level, where we're able to take those entry level jobs and kind of divide those skills a little bit and encourage people to use that skill for their next step. So for us, it's an opportunity to think top down, really, and to be able to be more inclusive in that skill development.
I think I'll add on to what both Meg and Jeff said. I think that the common thread for a lot of communities is there's a lot of talent on the sidelines. So whether that's entry level talent that's not engaging in those high demand, higher wage jobs, or if it's people who've not been engaged in the workforce, opportunity youth, thinking about adults with some college, no degree, and being able to engage them while also providing a visible pathway. I think we assume people know the path, and the reality is not that many people know the path. And so by creating a visual pathway, by creating a common language around skills, and how are we matching those skills to credentials, and how are we matching those skills to job experience in a single place, so that people can be mobile in their careers and also be economically mobile, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I so appreciate these comments, because you really all just painted this picture, right? Of it's complicated yet full of opportunity. There's ability for visibility, pathways, and really embracing so many individuals that we might be missing in our talent pipelines and our workforce. So I really appreciate that. So I know also tech has been entering this conversation a bunch, right? We're seeing this partnered. Sometimes that's a thing we see, sometimes it's not, from the education, workforce, et cetera, spaces. So I'm curious, just let's go ahead and talk about tech, and how does this fit into how you're seeing solutions being built around the skills-based workforce strategies?
Dana, Credential Engine's programming often interfaces very directly with a lot of different tech product companies that are servicing skills-based markets. And, one of the reflections that we've had right from the start has been how other industries have benefited from technology once they're able to reach some basic level of agreement about semantics and meaning and data standards. You don't think about it, but like the reason a lot of industries can scale up and offer competitive services is because of that foundational layer of basic agreements about the rules of the road, how we're going to communicate with each other, how we're going to signal what makes our credential unique and what skills it requires, or how much it costs, the quality, the outcomes. All of these different attributes, different pieces of metadata are just essential for really doing any kind of operation technically. And so we've benefited a lot from good partnerships, Merit and others that are committed to that kind of semantic and data interoperability. And so I think that's one piece to be explicit about as you're making your headway into the skills-based world.
Yeah. I wonder if you'd allow me to use the word connective tissue. That's what I kept thinking of as you were sharing that. It's really the connective tissue for your strategy.
I like that. I suspect more and more the organic biological metaphors will be important in our,
yes, because I love a metaphor.
CRISPR DNA futures. Yes, that's good.
It wasn't that long ago that I was part of the 50% just beginning, right? So I asked someone, so what LER, digital wallet, explain that to me. And the correlation I got was an electronic medical record. I was like, oh, I totally get that. That is the tech in medicine right now, right? You can take that electronic medical record anywhere you want. It follows you from place to place. It empowers you to look up your information quickly. And so that for me was a great understanding, because we deal with that every day. So I really enjoy that part, the tech part of this work, because it really does empower a person to hold that skill personally and to be able to use that in your daily life and moving forward.
Agency.
Yeah. And I think from, you know, the perspective of merit, we partner with Meg on a project, and I think recognizing that the technology is pretty new for most people, and creating space for questions. Sometimes the same questions get asked multiple times, but the more we talk about it and the light bulbs come on, then I think especially in Spokane, when we were having lunch that day and there were questions and I wasn't answering the questions. And I think that's when we know that we are making small steps forward, that we can all talk about it. We've moved from all learning about it to now we're all talking about it and figuring out these are the applications, these are the steps that we can take. So I think that's a really important piece, is that we have to be patient with sometimes ourselves, but also with the people that that are around us, the frontline folks who are going to be working with the people using the wallet, the people actually using the wallet, so that they understand how that's going to work. And I think in all of our spaces, Jeff, Meg, Merritt, we all sort of are mindful of that.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if Jeff's going to get mad. I'm stealing one of your other metaphors for this, is that it's a team sport. That's also something I'm hearing y'all share. So like, not only is the tech piece connective tissue, allowing us to set the different ways we're going to interact with one another, have the conversations, Laura, that you're stating, et cetera. So yeah, I think that's an important point to make, because it's brand new, right? It is brand new to many of us, and we're learning as we go, for sure. Absolutely. So as we begin to define what this is, the different elements, have these conversations, be inquiring together, exploring what it means to have an actual strategy and solution, I'm curious what you all see as being the biggest opportunity, because let's just be real, I think this can seem really daunting to a lot of individuals. So I like to always perspective take and pivot, right? There's opportunity when we're maybe overwhelmed or fearful, maybe even, or anxious about a solution or something new. So what do you each see from where you're sitting is, what is the opportunity that we have around skills-based workforce strategies?
Mm-hmm.
I think what I see is an opportunity to really change the system. And I think in the projects we're doing, we're taking a systems change approach. There are certain, you know, we have to know what the ecosystem is. We have to build this change on trust and relationship. And as that trust grows over time, you see more innovation, you see more innovative thought. And it's not an overnight thing. It really is sort of, you're in this together, kind of for the long haul. And I think from a technology perspective, the LER isn't the answer. Systems change, relationship, trust, and forward movement is the answer. The LER is just the tool that you can use. And I think when we position ourselves as the tool, we empower the system to really do the work that they want to do and achieve the goals they want to accomplish.
Laura, that resonated a lot with my thoughts as well. I mean, I've seen a lot of progress being made at the state level as they've been able to build what I'll just call like a community of practice. They're folks who have shared goals, and they have common connection points and interest in some of these technical topics, but they're, you know, it's a forum through which you can recognize that you're not competing with each other.
Right.
And I think sometimes, for whatever reason, we have like a mindset that, you know, if this agency wins or this product is more successful, then that deters from my programming in some way. But I've found that not to be the case, actually, in those states that have been quite successful and moving forward with LER programming. They've had a very welcoming attitude towards anyone that can help contribute their programming directly, or the insights that they've gained from other places, and that just builds confidence. And I think the foundation of trust that you were talking about comes from just that regular kind of interaction as a community of people focused on these goals of skill-based hiring.
You know, Providence is a huge system. We're in 7 states. And we're really looking at our large scale talent needs. When we think about that, that LER and that skills-based strategy, it's important to Providence, but it's also important across other healthcare organizations, right? Because we really want to be in a community where we're uplifting that skill set for everyone. Kind of helps with the competition, right? So when we think about that, looking at how we can provide that knowledge then allows a person to be part of a larger team, a community team. I just have to tell a little story about, I always say competencies build competencies. And I think Jeff just mentioned that confidence and competency. So I'm a grandmother. My 4-year-old granddaughter just learned how to ride her bike. You would have thought that was the best day of her life. Now think back. Think about the very moment when your parents let go of that back of your bicycle and you rode off. You all remember it, right? You felt like you owned the world. You all of a sudden had a competence that made you confident. And it's not competitive because now I can ride my bike with anybody. I can be part of a family ride. I can go anywhere. I can do more. My world gets wider and brighter because of that. It really does build grit. I'm always struck by that because, we didn't have video back then. So, now I play it on a daily basis. And I want to go back to, I love this, the definition of a credential, a qualified achievement, even for a 4-year-old. Learning how to ride a bike is a qualified achievement. So now think about that from an adult perspective.
Yeah. Well, and I think to add on, people who are on the sidelines and not participating need that same confidence builder to propel them forward. And I don't think it matters how old you are. I do remember how I felt the first time I rode that bike, and it felt like freedom. So
yeah, it did.
Yeah.
And I just love because a lot of times this conversation is around from that outside view. I love that Meg took us to the inside view of the ownership, the agency. I was thinking freedom too. That's what I felt when I first took those training wheels off and went, try not to go down the hill. We lived on the top of a big hill. So it was really, But anyway.
Break.
Exactly. And from the individual's perspective of building confidence, a lot of times we talk about this makes the lens bigger of finding talent, but what about those individuals who make up the talent pool? I mean, this is a powerful, to use your language, Laura, this really is system change and flipping the script as well, in terms of how we're looking at engaging and inviting humans to work alongside us and support our various goals as organizations and communities as well. Yeah. Anything else in terms of the opportunity? I love that, Meg. Thank you for sharing that story with us.
Sorry, I always have to try to get him in somehow.
Meg, it made me just think that it's a great example of a recognition, at least, as a group here, about a skill that is valued, and how often I feel like we have folks in our ecosystem that are demonstrating employable skills. You hear it sometimes in different language around soft skills or what have you. It's a form of expression of informal learning that's valued in the marketplace, but it's not recognized because there's no mechanism through which an employer or a credential provider or even the person themselves can document those skills in a way that employers can understand. So I think there is a through line, especially as our future becomes less certain and clear about what are the skills needed for the future of work. How can I have ownership over that record and be able to articulate and document skills in a way that's to my career advantage? And so there's something unique and still valuable in that particular example, and how it could apply through to, I think, the future of skill-based hiring.
Yeah. I also think we don't know what jobs we're going to be hiring for even in 5 years. And so if we're able to attach skills now, we're going to be better positioned to be able to be ready and agile as jobs adjust. And knowing what skills are going to mean someone is successful in this new job, I think is going to be just really critical.
So in my mind, I have skills equal agility, accessibility, new invitations, opportunities. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So just a quick reminder, in case y'all didn't see in the chat, thank you. We have that fixed, and it's important that we get your questions answered. So please don't forget to drop some of your questions in the Q&A, because we're going to try and get to as many as we can. So in kind of telling the story of today, the conversation we've had thus far, from defining, so we have a common language, to affect and impact change, to talking about what this looks like from where we each sit, the opportunity of it, talking about tech in the space as well. So, but I want to come back to where we started, which is 50% of the individuals who are with us today in community are new. And I've been using this word daunting because that's the real reality. And I think that it's important for us to really be a space to help people feel like they can take a step forward. So from where each of you are sitting, I'm curious, how would you make this less daunting? Like, where do we start?
That comes up a good bit in the work we do with states who are at varying levels. And I think the through line we often advise on is to just begin by what we call turning on the lights, just being able to see your existing ecosystem helps kind of help you see whether it's serving its purpose or not, and that can help define like the next sets of work that your ecosystem wants to focus in on. And so one of the parts of the programming at Credential Engine is to help credential issuers and provide structured, explicit data about the credentials that they're offering. And that can include everything from just the type of credentials that they are, who offers them, but also the skills that they confer or the connections that they have amongst and between themselves. So what is the path or sequence to obtain a occupational license in this particular state? What are the on-ramps, and are there any? Are there any free or low-cost micro-credentials being offered for this in-demand occupation? That, something comes up really only after you go through the attempt of trying to document all of those things and understand your existing ecosystem as a collective group, and then reflect on it. So I'd suggest just getting started there. Just understanding the offerings that your ecosystem has in place today is a good place to start.
What else? Where else would y'all start, Megan, Laura?
I think I would say I'm aligned with what Jeff says. You have to try something. And I think the sort of the systems piece of it is you're always looking at your table and who else should be around the table. What are you missing? If you think you have it perfect, go back and think again. In the, the whole scheme of it, I'm a terrible, with the strengths finder, includer is my last, it's number 34. And so I'm always in my head thinking who else should be in this space. The second is to remain focused on the learner. Because in the end, the learner still has to choose to take advantage of an opportunity to participate in the skills-based hiring, to want to track their skills. And so, staying focused on how that's going to look for them, I think is a good kind of North Star for any effort. And then just try stuff, pilot things with an eye towards scale. Like, don't just try things because you've got a good school system or you've got a good post-secondary partner, or you've got a good employer. All of those things have to work together to make it scalable. So, thinking about it in those terms, I think is really important. And then I think all of us on this panel here are interested in talking about it. We're all nerds here. I think we all have owned that at some point. in our friendship, we like to talk about how it might work. And so, lean into those folks who are willing to have those conversations. I think it's also another good step.
From a Providence perspective, I think we're always looking for solutions. And so I'll go back to what Laura said, that partnership piece, right? Who's offering something that can be helpful, especially in the talent space right now. So I think about our digital learners, right? And how do we engage them in a way that makes sense to them, not to us, right? So looking for those opportunities, those platforms, those organizations that are doing work that helps you with a problem and get to where you need to be.
Yeah. So I'm hearing turn the light on, look up and look out.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to do it alone, to the 50% of us on here right now. We don't have to do it alone because we can't do it alone. All of this is about partnership, conversation, connecting dots. Absolutely. Well, if y'all are okay, we just actually had a great follow-up question. Thank you, Paul, who is connecting dots already, as if you're in here in my little facilitator notes. And Paul asked if you all would be willing to share your perspectives on engaging small and medium-sized employers around skills-based workforce, with the awareness that, having limited in-house HR and training capabilities for those smaller orgs. And Paul shared, he's in Montana, where 67% of workers are employed by a small or medium-sized business.
Yeah.
So
I can just share that comes up all the time. America's, thrives on small businesses. Many people are employed at small companies, and I guess what we found is that the talent needs are the same. That they need skilled employees for the jobs that they're trying to fill, and the best way to attract talent to those job opportunities is to be explicit about those career pathways that the individual can have and benefit from. And that might mean, given a small shop and limited number of positions or mobilities, but it could be latching your work into a bigger career pathway with other jobs in the area, or a regional competitive strategy. I've seen a lot of great work where small groups of businesses have come together and said, we need to focus in on the career pathways for this talent pipeline. And it's not that one company benefits and the other loses. It's that collectively, by being explicit about that and working with their local credential issuers, they can attract talent and retain them in that geographic area for the betterment of each. So I think the capacity thing's real. So there are state resources that could be invested in that kind of regional approach as well to help so it's not such a big lift for small employers to engage in that pathway construction. But I've seen that to be a successful approach.
Can I add a little Montana piece to that? I love Montana. So I particularly like the University of Montana's work in qualifying certain skills, and I'll just take medical assistant as an example, right? I'm going to just use my healthcare hat, put my healthcare hat on. Working with high school students to qualify some of that learning that then gives them prior credit or dual credit, which then for us, even as we're a large organization, but we also have small ministries and smaller communities that we serve. It gives us an opportunity to help that individual accelerate that learning and then continue on that pathway. So shout out to Montana. They have a great dual credit system. I'll just go there. But that's a credential, right? And that is an opportunity to use those skills and to think about how you build on that and make that efficiency better for business.
I think Meg and Jeff really hit on the point that there's power in partnership. So I think sectoral partnerships are really important. A lot of states are kind of leaning into that because you're right. There are, most communities are, mostly small businesses. And so how do you create that larger voice, connect to the bigger work? Jeff mentioned, that partnership where maybe in order for someone to grow, they may have to grow out of your company. But if you are a place where people can grow, you don't have a problem filling your positions. And so if that's the reality of your workplace, then lean into it and make it the best workplace, because you're going to retain some of that talent naturally, but you'll also become a destination of choice if someone knows I can start here and for 5 years I can grow and then move on to that next thing. You've got a good employee that's dedicated for 5 years. So I think that's one really important piece of it. Leveraging those funding streams that are coming into a state that are really incentivizing sector partnerships and incentivizing working together to build a broader workforce pipeline. And Meg mentioned K-12, and a student graduating from high school with an industry recognized credential and a visible pathway is going to keep that talent in your state. And so this isn't just it feels good to have filled positions. It feels good to retain talent in your state so that when they graduate high school, they're training and working in your state, and then they stay in your state. So I think, and that's a struggle for a lot of states right now, is that talent is leaving for opportunity. So creating that opportunity within your own state is really a byproduct of skills-based hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. Thank you for those fabulous answers, which tees up another question that we just got in as well, which is kind of drilling down a little bit more about what I think we're really talking about here is transferable skills, right? The agility to move throughout an organization, throughout a community, a system,
Right.
systems. So the question was, what is your perspective on transferable skills and how employers are leveraging them?
I think we saw this a lot during the pandemic. I'm going to take my merit hat off for a minute and just, think about during the pandemic, there were so many people who lost their jobs, who needed to work. And the adjacent skills were what moved them into different careers. There's a lot of adjacent skills between hospitality, retail, and healthcare, logistics. So I think that by having a marketplace of people who have defined skills, you're really broadening your pool. You can say that these adjacent skills would also meet your needs, and then you're bringing people into the workforce who are looking for opportunity. So I think by creating that, you really are positioning yourself for the workforce of the future.
It reminds me, I had a discussion with Charla Long from the Competency-Based Education Network, and she shared a story in Illinois where there's a critical need for I'm not going to get the role quite right, but it was an entry-level nursing positions and just not enough folks. And they went through a process of reflecting on what are the skills needed actually for this job. And it turned out they were like, being quite patient with people, being great listeners, being able to handle emergencies that come up with tact and skill. And, when they started looking at that set of skills, they realized, actually a lot of these are skills that teachers demonstrate, especially grade school teachers, kindergarten teachers. They have to be on those skills. And so it led to a recruitment campaign that was quite successful in bringing, teachers who looking for a career change into considering these nursing positions where there was good skill overlap. So it was just a real specific example of how these transferable skills can enable people to, pursue new career opportunities they didn't even know about. And I just feel like there's going to be more of that in the future where careers are changing, and we just need to be more self-aware ourselves about our own skills and then look for the connection points out there.
I have a whole list of questions. I just want to make sure I'm holding space for y'all to share your expertise. Okay, this one's related to a specific, it's from Shelby. How can a skills-based approach be used or applied in higher ed to better align with higher ed curricula so that graduates are more aligned with the needs of the labor market? Thoughts on this?
I think from a merit perspective, our work with Credential Engine is really critical to that. Credential Engine is building space for consistency and for a common language. So if we're using that common language, if we're leaning into that tool, then a student knows what skills they have and employers know what skills they need. And so being able to connect that, the interoperability of a platform, I think is really important. And we've kind of talked about, what do you look for? Interoperability is the piece, because we want to be able to connect talent and employers and education. And education institutions are accredited and they have requirements for giving prior learning credit. If we're setting up this system that gives them verified skills that someone has demonstrated, then it's much easier to award prior learning credit and keep that momentum going through an associate degree or a bachelor's degree or a graduate degree, if that's what's necessary for career goals. But it also positions someone for positions that have previously required an associate degree. Now we can say an associate degree or these skills. And then have a reliable way to verify that. I think that's the important piece, is we want to look at skills-based hiring, but how do we verify it? And I think that's what we're building together, is a way to do that and make it measurable and reportable, and so that we can look at progress along that continuum.
That's great. Seems like great advice. Lots of great entry points to competency-based education. And we haven't used the word assessment yet, but I'll just put it on the table that a lot of competency-based programs have thought quite deeply about student learning assessment practices, and being willing as an institution to have those conversations with faculty and instructors, to put them on the table in front of your peers through curriculum committee meetings, and being able to interrogate them and say, well, is this really evidence of this skill that we would be proud enough to put our institution name behind in front of our local employers? That's some of the partner development work I think that institutions are doing right now on a regular basis, but in this move with LERs becomes a through line for new hiring practices and new value add for the credentials of the institution. So I just probably double down on the good work that's probably already going on in your state in that regard.
It also can create a feedback loop. So if employers aren't getting the talent they need, they can go straight to that education provider and say, hey, these skills are not showing up in the talent we're getting. And it creates a sort of a data dialogue. The evidence does not show that what you're teaching matches these skills requirements. And so you can make adjustments that way, versus, trying to figure out what, you're using evidence instead of trying to figure out what is missing.
I could make that just a little more simplistic from the employer view, right? So, we oftentimes don't understand 4 years of a curriculum, right? So as we're credentialing along the way, or adding those micro credentials to that degree, we get a better sense of what that learning is. And it's, if we recognize it, we don't have to go back in and find it. And so we're able to take someone who's maybe a little bit or even halfway through and say, hey, you're doing this and you have these skills. Have you ever thought about this? Right? So I think for an employer working with a college on something like that makes complete sense, because it's just more expedient.
Right.
Absolutely. Shelby, thank you for that question. We have another one for y'all from Melanie asked if the presenters could share what indicators of learning program quality do you see as important as we move toward building a skills-based workforce? And how do we ensure this approach creates equitable job pathways?
Oh, I'd love to start on that one if I could, because it's
Go for it, Jack.
it's such an important question. And I guess one, I think implicit in that question is a recognition that quality should be made explicit. And I totally agree with that. Quality can't continue to be an implicit, kind of insiders club knowledge network of social connections and history that people have benefited from and been disadvantaged by. And so, if we're serious about promoting equity and a more inclusive society, we need to begin to make quality claims clear and explicit so everyone can benefit from them. And that might entail a variety of metrics. I don't, Credential Engine as an organization is not committed to a set of quality metrics per se, but whatever those metrics are, they should be made clear and explicit to everyone. And so we can help with that part of it. There are many states that have advanced good programming around credentials of value and quality, defining their own metrics. Some of those are on the design state side before the credential's ever been offered. These particular things need to be in place. And then increasingly, there's expectations of outcomes after it's offered to students. We want to see these kinds of numbers and returns and whatever they are. And that's all good and important work. So I just encourage you to be to find definitions you can reach good agreement on amongst your ecosystem, and then move on those to be made more explicit and clear.
And just before anyone else jumps in, I want to circle that if I can virtually in the Zoom land, but reach agreement on definition, because how many times are things defined without, Laura, to your point, and Meg, you've shared this as well, without setting the table, connecting the dots, having the conversation, because then it does turn into that daunting ecosystem of all the things, because we've not turned, stood up, turned the light on, stood up, looked up and out, and then started connecting. So, yeah. Anything else that y'all want to share on? Laura, are we going to share something?
I had a couple of thoughts based on, kind of Jeff, what you said. So I think there are every state is getting federal labor dollars, and they're investing those dollars, but there are no quality measures attached to those investments. So I do think there is an opportunity with federal policy. We've been talking about the WIOA reauthorization since Jesus was a baby, I think. It feels like we've had these conversations for so many years, but really attaching quality measures versus activity measures, I think is important to getting us to the other side. The other piece of that closing equity gaps and closing the opportunity gap is ensure that your technology solution is solving for that. In the work that we're building, there's an opportunity portal that is basically blind. If you hold the skills and credentials, you receive an invitation to opportunity. And I think that's important, because that's the secret piece that people are missing when there's large equity gaps, is opportunity. And I think we can all think about, if we think about our own career pathways, and I challenge us all to think about, I think after a certain age, you don't get the job by submitting your resume. You get the job by your network. And how do we empower students now and adults who are on the sidelines to activate a network that they don't have? And that comes with opportunity. And so how do we build that opportunity into the skills-based marketplace so we don't widen gaps that already exist, but we are closing those gaps that have existed for a long time? And I think if you talk about that up front as you're co-creating your solutions in your communities and in your states, then you're going to get closer to that answer. But you do have to be really thoughtful about it. I think Jeff and Meg have both mentioned the thoughtfulness of this proposition.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I know there were some other questions. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them. I want to thank you all, though, for asking the questions, sending them ahead of time, giving them to us live. They're definitely going to continue to inform how we are going to honor these inquiries and be a place that's a resource and a connector for this continued conversation. So I want to just ask each of you, if you're hoping, what's the one thing you're hoping someone would take away from the dialogue today? I know I sprung that one on you, but
Yeah.
you're one thing.
You know,
It's not fair.
I like the lights on, right? Take an opportunity to think more fully about skills, take an opportunity to think about where it's important to house those for an individual and why. And just start. Look for a partnership in your community that can help you with that.
Meg, I like that, especially the getting started message, because I think the credentialing ecosystem, just to say, is large and it can feel complex. But you can't have that analysis paralyze you, right, into not acting. That's not an option.
Right.
You need to begin your programming and advance it as you can through the opportunities you have available to you, and learn as you go. And sure enough, as you're building the plane, like it's going to change. And so there's not like a perfect moment to launch your skills-based hiring initiative. You should get started. That's what I encourage folks to do.
Yeah. I think that you just get started, find your people. There are other people in your community or your ecosystem who also want to just get started. And it's much easier when even if you just have a small table, some of the best work that is done starts with a small table that gets bigger. And so I think that's really what you have to do. And also recognize there's other people grappling with this. In our prep session, we were talking about the Wizard of Oz. And, you know, when you pull back the curtain, the reality is we are all struggling with how this is going to look and what it's going to look like and what's going to happen and what's going to go wrong and what's going to go right. So lean into the other people outside of your community who are doing this, because sometimes those are the tables where the best ideas come from for everybody. Because, you know, sometimes you have to process it externally and get feedback in order to move forward. So getting stuck is normal. Staying stuck, you don't have to. So, you know, I think lean into your networks and lean into the people on this call to help you sort of get through those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just taking notes. That was my pause. There's so many good things here, but in terms of there's opportunity, we don't have to do it alone. The value of conversation, just keep talking, and the worthiness of a small step. Just one to get started. So for the 50% of us on here who are, if you joined us late, we ranked ourselves in terms of where we're at. We're a lot of newbies, and that's okay. And that is all right. I also want to encourage, again, I know we've been holding the microphone for a bit here, but in the chat, we just posted, we'd love to hear what your one thing is, what you're taking away. If you don't want to do that on the spot, I mean, I'd love to share out some of what y'all share, but I encourage you to take the survey because we really want to hear from you. This truly is a dialogue. This is a conversation. So we really hope that you will do that. Also, again, I know we started with terminology. Look for that. If that's interesting to you as a conversation starter, we will provide that to you. We'd like to be a resource. And maybe, you know, what's one thing you're choosing to do as you leave here? If there's not a takeaway, or maybe there's an immediate move to action, like let's start talking about it. I want to bring this definition to someone. I want to check this out with one of my partners that actually need to invite to the table, right? Or maybe there isn't a table. Maybe it's just you. And that's okay too. But hopefully we've given you something, a little nugget to go take over to someone else and begin your worthy one step forward. So we hope that. I appreciate the gratitude I'm seeing in the chat. Thank you so much. Awesome. So please take the survey, look for additional information to come from us in terms of resources for y'all. And as Laura said, underscoring, we're here to help. So if there are more questions, need more resources, we need to do this together. It is, again, I'm stealing it, Jeff, a team sport. We need to come together for that. I would like to just take a moment and say thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Laura. Thank you to the rest of the Merit team that showed up to support us today. Thank you to each of you who showed up. Oh, I'm sorry, I just dropped my phone. This is what happens when you talk with your hands. But thank you so much for being here today, and we really appreciate y'all. Awesome. Thank you so much. And that concludes our first conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you.